where it is 5 p.m. and it is just the end of the 5th plenary assembly of the Global Soil Partnership of the FAO. And I am here with Luca Montanarella. So, Luca, you are the chair of the very first Intergovernmental Technical Panel of Soil, which is one of the main pillars of the Global Soil Partnership. What have you been looking at today? But first of all, could you explain to us what this partnership is about?
The Global Soil Partnership is something we invented in 2011. The idea originally was to have something like the Global Water Partnership, if you are familiar with that. The Global Water Partnership exists already since many years and is based in Stockholm and is a free, let's say, partnership of NGOs, governments, organizations, institutions that want to work together in the issue of water resources. And we wanted to do a similar thing for soils. It should have been a sort of coalition of the willing, of institutions, governments, NGOs, all kind of active people and organizations that want to somehow protect global soil resources. This was the original idea. Okay,
and it's actually quite important to explain that we were here in March, and you had organized the very first global symposium on soil organic carbon.
Yeah, then of course from 2011 till today a lot of things have happened. The partnership has been established. We have a well-functioning secretariat here hosted by FAO. We have the panel I'm chairing, which is the Intergovernmental Technical Panel on Soils, dealing with soil science-related issues. And one of the things we came up after the recent discussions within the COP21 of UNFCCC, so the Climate Change Convention, where you may know that also soils were discussed as a major carbon pool. There was interest to organize a specific event together with IPCC, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and others on the relevance of soil organic carbon for climate change mitigation and adaptation. On top, soil organic carbon has many other functions. You may know that soil organic carbon is very relevant for soil biodiversity. So if there's a lot of organic matter in soils, usually you have more life in soil. So you are delivering more ecosystem services. You are more productive. You don't need so many fertilizers. You are more protecting the soil from the effect of chemicals because they get buffered by the organic matter. So there's a lot of positive things that can be moved and can be called upon when you have a high level of organic carbon in soils. So we decided to have a joint meeting, a very first one, Global Symposium on Soil Organic Carbon here in Rome at FAO, hosted by the Global Soil Partnership, and I think it was, in my view, quite a big success. A success not so much scientifically, but I would say success because for the first time we brought together not only scientists but also others, particularly the major organizations in the UN dealing with this issue, stakeholders of all kinds, also NGOs, also industry. So it was quite a productive meeting, I would say.
There's an interesting quote that I heard today, and that was, the better we treat our soils, the better we treat ourselves. Now, what does that make you think of?
It made me think of healthy people when there are healthy soils. Soils are our foundation. I mean, there are plenty of references in history and also in religion of the links between humans and their soils. That's where we have our roots, where we come from, and we go back to, actually. So there's definitely a lot of emotional links between us and soils, but there are also really factual links. The fact that what we eat usually comes from the soil, is produced on soil. And of course, if you have soils which are not that healthy, the food that you produce is not that healthy. I mean, a very classical example is the growing concern that we have on soil contamination. It was very much discussed also here today in the meeting. That is the next focus of our activities for the next year. It's because soil contamination, which is increasing, dramatically increasing in many parts of the world, particularly in agricultural land, has very long-ranging implication on our health. This because contaminants enter the food chain, and the food chain then enters in our dishes, and then we eat it, and then there are consequences for all of us. So healthy soils produce healthy food, and healthy food, of course, allows us all to have healthy lives.
So an intergovernmental panel, an intergovernmental organization, that will be actually coming together Thursday morning to be talking about contaminated soils globally and how to address them. I mean, you know, for our viewers here who aren't that familiar with all these with these expertise sectors and these expert discussions, I mean, is this something that happens often? Is this something that, you know, where experts come together and discuss these matters often? And if not, what should be done? You know,
I think there are many.
Are there more efforts?
What is happening is that there are many scientific meetings. So top experts, let's say, from the academia coming together and talking about such issues, usually with very high-level scientific papers. But what you need then is, at a certain moment, you need to translate the scientific knowledge into action. And that's what we're trying to do here. So the panel I'm chairing is not a body that does new science. It's an organization, it's an intergovernmental panel that is there to translate existing science into action in the policy circles. And that's this science policy interface role that we have, that is the added value that we bring in. It's like this, through that process that we can mobilize governments by raising the awareness based on scientific evidence that there's something to be done about burning issues, for example, soil contamination. And that's what we will do on Thursday morning. So thanks also to the organization of the Italian government. We will have a specific side event dedicated to soil contamination, and there we will highlight the increasing threat to human health by increasing soil contamination. And this will be setting the first step towards the next conference that we plan next year in March that will be dedicated to this topic. And we hope that it will have the same impact like we have had with the organic carbon discussions we had this year, that probably will help us to move on, possibly in a positive way.
So, coming back to the global symposium on soil organic carbon, we had the president of Fiji that was here. Fiji this year, that is taking the presidency of the COP23. So the COP23 are the climate talks around the famous Paris Agreement, that the Trump administration scrapped. Not the United States, the Trump administration. And so soil is now big on the agenda, you know, on the, what do you think?
I think it should be relatively big on the agenda. It's certainly bigger on the agenda than years ago, but it's far away from being of relevance on the agenda like other issues, starting with the most important issue, which is reducing emissions. I mean, we can find all kinds of ways to increase soil organic carbon, which is a way also to stock atmospheric CO2 into the soil, and so have a mitigation effect. But the crucial issue remains that we must reduce emissions if we really want to tackle the issue of climate change. So this brings back to the issue that it's not that through carbon sequestration technologies or better management of soil organic carbon that we will solve the problem of climate change. The problem of climate change needs to be solved by reducing CO2 emissions, and this is what the Paris Agreement was essentially calling for. And I'm sure that also in the next COP it will remain, the topic on the agenda will be how to continue with a reduction of emissions, of course supported by technologies that can be used on mitigation, like for example increasing soil organic carbon stocks. But pretending to solve the problem by continuing our way of life, but at the same time storing CO2 somewhere else, I think it's utopical. So I don't believe that this would be happening.
No, well, I personally agree that, you know, wanting to offset the fossil fuel activities that our civilization emits with ecological restoration is potentially something very dangerous.
Yeah. Notwithstanding that it is useful.
However, would it be safe to say that cutting emissions is one half of the climate solution, and the other solution is how do we draw down the excess emissions that we already have in the atmosphere? Not that we just have carbon, but we also have nitrous oxides. We also have methane. And if we were to cut, many scientists are saying, if we were to cut all of our emissions today, we're still heading towards catastrophic global climate change.
Absolutely. I mean, the big problem is that reversing what we have done in the past 100, 200, 300 years is very difficult. So you will have inertia of the whole system that will continue. For soil scientists, particularly of concern is, of course, the area around the North Pole, the circumpolar soils, which, as probably is well known, are the biggest single stock of organic carbon. These are frozen soils, so-called permafrost, which also store a very large amount of methane. There's a lot of concern that the increasing temperatures will melt extensively those permafrost soils, releasing methane that is known to have a much, much stronger greenhouse gas effect than CO2 or N2O. So there are all kind of processes that are much bigger of what we can even imagine linked to soils, and that's why there's really the need to understand this better, to have better science underpinning it, and also trying to act positively. But I repeat, the utopia to save the climate change issue by increasing soil organic carbon is a little bit a dream. Of course, I repeat, increasing soil organic carbon levels in soils is good anyway. It's not only for climate change. As I said, it's good for agriculture, it's good for farming, it's good for production, it's good for healthy soils, it's good for the biodiversity in soils. There's many, many things that makes it positive.
In terms of land degradation, so there are three ways of degrading land. So there's urbanization, of course. Then you have chemically intensive agriculture that disrupts the carbon cycle massively. Deep tillage, when we till the soils, they oxidize and that releases carbon out into the atmosphere as well. And of course we have deforestation and the massive problem of burning down the lungs of the planet Earth, burning down the rainforests. However, there are some papers, there is some peer-reviewed science on how we can actually increase soil organic matter quite considerably on soils that are really heavily degraded. And one good example is the Rodale Institute, who've managed to increase soil organic matter by 30% over a period of 18 years on soils that were heavily contaminated. So our feeling at Regeneration International and the Organic Consumers Association, and our understanding that we believe is quite accurate, is to, if we were to work all together to address heavily degraded soils in a way that actually nature wants it, we could do a lot of good, and we could go beyond mitigating climate change. Of course, it's, we could stop war if we wanted to. But is this something you think could be viable?
On planet Earth, before humans arrived, soil organic carbon was the natural level. Okay, so that's the level that you should have if you would not have any human interaction on soils. As soon as humans came on this planet, they had an impact, and of course you cannot eliminate humans unless you want to transfer all of us on a different planet. So if we want to live on this planet, you must find a way to find a compromise. And of course, there are many practices that increase or decrease soil organic carbon levels, but be aware there is a natural level that is the level you can achieve, and this level is depending on where you are, which type of soils you are, in which climate zone you are. So it's not a one-for-all fitting solution. Then there are many things that are here that should be considered with care. I mean, for example, there is a big push towards eliminating tillage. Well, tillage is the basis of agriculture since centuries, and there are very good reasons for that. If you do really agriculture, you know why. And of course, people should be aware that if you adopt zero tillage, yes, you can, but be aware, usually it's associated with very large use of herbicides, because if you don't till, you will have usually quite an increase in weeds, for example. So there are all trade-offs between different solutions, and I don't believe that there is a solution that fits everything. I repeat, I'm firmly convinced that it's important to protect the soil organic carbon in the soil and possibly also increase it, but I don't believe at all in technical solutions that can be the solution for everywhere. There have been many technologies proposed. I mean, another classic is the addition of stabilized carbon, so-called biochar, I mean, which is essentially charcoal. Yes, you can add tons of charcoal in soils and it will stay there forever. The question is, what happens when there's erosion? Where does it go? What happens if there's wind erosion? Where do the particles of carbon go? In our noses, in our lungs? What happens if you want one day to change the type of land use or type of cultivation type? You can't take the charcoal out anymore. I mean, there are plenty of issues that should be considered a little bit more with more care when people propose so-called magic bullet solutions. That's why you need good science. That's why I insist the panel I'm chairing is a scientific panel. It doesn't have the pretension to do politics. It doesn't have a pretension to express opinions. It's just expressing scientific facts. Sometimes the science is lacking. That is true. If you don't have good science, it's better to say we don't know than saying something that is not based on facts.
And so you receive input from the Global Soil Partnership.
The Global Soil Partnership, the partners are the ones who tell us what they're interested in. Today,
so who can join this
everybody.
Everybody can join.
Also, I hope your organization is
joining.
Yes,
we've joined.
Okay,
we've joined, and
that's great. That's great.
We look forward to giving you a lot of input.
Because one of the added values of the Global Soil Partnership is that it's open to everybody who wants to really do something positive on soils. And so I'm very happy that you joined, and I'm hoping that many others will join.
Yes, well, all our partners out there, if you are a farmer, if you have a farming organization, you're an NGO, you're into ecological restoration, or even you're just into policy, you can actually sign on to the Global Soil Partnership that you can find on the FAO website.
Just download the form, send it to the Secretariat, and it's done usually, and this allows you to be fully involved in what we're doing.
Fully involved and given the opportunity to give input, research, papers, techniques, the best practices to this Intergovernmental Technical Panel on soil.
And tell us on which we should do our next studies and our next work.